Hi all. Yeah, I'm here with Katie McNeice. She's written a fantastic screenplay called In Orbit Script, and actually is in pre-production now. So congratulations with your script nomination for Fusion International Film Festival, Katie, and taking the time out. And I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning she's actually in Florida at the moment, so a bit sickening. So anyone that's listening, any part of Europe or the UK, whatever Ireland, then don't feel sorry for her. So thank you. Thanks for joining us, Katie. So yeah, obvious question. Yeah, can you just give us a brief synopsis of the script, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So basically, just to say from the beginning that In Orbit was the script that I wanted to write, where I knew I was going to direct it for the first time ever. So I wanted it to be a really personal story. And I wanted to write about something that I found really moving and that was personal to me. So I'm gay myself, but I wanted an LGBT story. And then when I was looking around, at other stuff that we have, like Netflix is getting better and different other platforms are getting better at having that kind of content, but they don't have anything for people who aren't my age. I mean, I'm 28 this week, actually.
Right.
And everyone on TV is either my age or younger. And I just found something so criminally unfair about it. So I ended up writing about older characters. And the second thing that I was really interested in is because In Orbit's kind of art house, as you know, it's not a straight narrative per se. So what I was really interested in writing about was not the experiences that we have had, but the experiences that we haven't had, and the ones that we almost didn't manage to have because of fear or because of not having the confidence, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time as well, and not being able to just go with your heart or whatever it is, even though that sounds very on the nose and romantic, and just go with the relationship and have these experiences. So In Orbit essentially is I've split into two worlds. The concept I landed on to help to tell a story like that was to open up with an elderly woman who's about 80 years of age. Her name is Maura, in an interview about the greatest experience of her life. I'm treating this like it's the greatest mission of all time. And what she does is we look through the glass with her, and she explains to us what happens when she was 40 years old. She was as lonely as hell. She'd never had a relationship. She's an optician, and she's so lonely and so convinced that she's never going to be able to love anybody that she literally sees the world differently. And so through her lens as the person who's being interviewed, she tells us the story of how her world was in the beginning, what it was like when she eventually met her love interest, and then literally the process of having to change her emotional perspective, her physical perspective, literally the way she looks at life, the world, and herself on every level, internally and externally, needs to change over time in order for her to be able to accept the fact, okay, this person loves me, I'm worth it, I can do this. And because her love interest actually tells her, listen, I've got a new job, I need to move, you need to come with me. Like, are you coming or are you not? And that's what the crux of her problem is. She needs to leave where she is in order to follow the relationship and follow her heart. But Maura, our character, is so tethered to the idea that she's never going to have love, that she's incapable of it, and why would anyone love her? And the fact also that it's a woman, it's a totally different experience. So she doesn't even geographically need to grapple with the fact that she needs to move. She needs to change her perspective on where she is emotionally and at her stage of life,
Thank you.
So that's it in a nutshell. It's kind of she the problem is, do I stay or do I go? She struggles with it the entire film, and at the end she makes up her mind.
And what's thank you very much for that synopsis. But what would be quite interesting to try and understand is, I know you identified a like a sector that wasn't being addressed, but to go from that realization to actually coming up a storyline or a narrative that fits that, I don't know if chink is the wrong word, but that to reach that that storyline that was clearly missing. How do you leap from that? Because you've identified that, but then you've got to come up with something that actually fits the story that you're trying to tell, if that kind of makes sense. So where did you... Yeah, how did you get from there to there?
Okay, so when I first started writing it was actually about 2 years ago. I've been working on this for a really long time. And at the time that I came up with it, I was actually working my job title was content coordinator, but I was essentially a journalist for IFTN, which is the Irish Film and Television Network.
Right.
With IFTN, they're very closely linked with IFTA, which is the Irish Film and Television Academy. So what I was doing is I was interviewing directors and writers and actors who were working on projects all the time, and I was also going to the award shows to work on social media and kind of digital media support is what I was doing. So I was really, really clued into what was going on in the Irish industry, so I knew what people were making shorts about, which I think writers don't do enough, actually. They don't know what other people are writing, so they don't know. Just that everyone talks about the zeitgeist, but I think if you're looking for the zeitgeist in anything, Jesus, watch short films. That's what people are thinking about, you know? But in my time at IFCN, I was actually, part of my daily routine would be to trawl the news every morning, see what was going on, particularly Irish. So you've got the Irish blinkers on, there's two green shamrocks in front of your eyes. If it's not Irish, you don't write about it, you know?
Well, if it's like us, Katie, there's only one story bloody dominating the news, and you're sick and tired of it as we are, even more so for us, of course, and that's Brexit. But anyway, moving on from that.
Even in Florida, now to mention Brexit, people kind of shiver, you know, it's quite warm over here. But yeah, so basically there was, I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a fantastic, it's an amazing documentary called The Farthest by Emer Reynolds, who's an Irish director, and she's actually traditionally an editor, but she directed this for the first time. And I saw this news that had been picked up, I think by PBS. I have to double check that now, but I think that's who it was. And I kind of reached out to the production company and said, okay, what's the story? It's an Irish documentary, can you tell me about it? And over the next couple of months, pictures started being released of the Helix Nebula, which is essentially, it's called the Eye of God in layman's terms, in space terminology. It's just one of the most beautiful images ever, and it's a dying star. You know, there's something so kind of forlorn and heartbreaking about that image. It's essentially a star releasing gas, and it's the most beautiful thing in the universe. And then when I eventually watched the documentary, because it was on RTE, I think it was on the Irish TV channel, you basically had the scientists who worked on sending the Voyager out to space, which was the 40-year anniversary of this happening. They were recalling sitting in the little booth, and, you know, the Voyager would go toward the planet, and I think it was, I don't know how far apart the images were, but they get picture, pause, picture, pause, picture, pause. And as the pictures would come in, the planets were getting bigger because they were getting closer to it. And this woman was talking, and her lip was shaking about being the first person ever in the world to see this planet and how moving it was. And you had scientists, like men who were in their 80s, like my character is, starting to cry about how profound it was to find something outside of ourselves. And I think it was the space metaphor and that image and the concept of having to go beyond yourself and your world as you know it in order to discover something fantastic just really, really stuck with me. So like I had been developing In Orbit as a story about a woman who, you know, the typical thing when you want to direct a short film, you limit your actor numbers and you limit your locations and stuff like that, so you can make it cheaply. So I essentially had my apartment in my head in a public park, and that was kind of it. And then I was like, Jesus, no, there's something in this image of space. There's something about it. There's something so profound about having to take such a leap of faith that, you know, a majority of the world would say, you can't do that. That's impossible. Because I think, and again, this might seem a little bit on the nose, but I think loving somebody and doing it properly, irrespective of whether or not you're gay or straight or whatever in the middle, is one of the most frightening things that you can do. And it takes an awful lot of faith. And more often than not, it doesn't work. So yeah, it was taking the images of something outside yourself. So with In Orbit, I said the world looks strange. I've actually taken open source NASA images of nebulas and galaxies and all this kind of stuff. And what I'm going to do is in the 2019 world, where my character is 40 years of age and she meets this woman, there is never anybody else in the shot but her. But I'm cutting the sky out of every single shot and putting this sky from NASA in behind it. So essentially it looks like a kind of a rusty brown colour with a teal going through it, and that's the world for 2019. And then for 2058 it's entirely different. Everything is blue. So it's literally that feeling of being trapped inside your own head. I mean, my own experience of like coming out and that, it wasn't the most straightforward, and it certainly wasn't easy, but at the same time I'm 28, so I'm of the generation where, again, you won't feel sorry for me because it's slightly breezy in Florida. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm of the generation where this is supposed to be easy. But, you know, to be honest with you, it doesn't feel easy a lot of the time. And that's what I wanted to communicate, is that feeling of, it's almost like people with severe depression are so caught in their own heads they can't see beyond it. In a sense, when you're trying to communicate what it feels like to be other, you know, to not see people like you on TV, to not have a mom or a dad or an auntie or a big sister who's lived like you, is really, really hard. It's crippling. It's emotionally crippling. Yeah. And I'm not saying that, you know, we haven't made progress or whatever like that. I'm just saying it's an entirely different emotional experience. Like, I have a twin sister. I can't explain this to her. She doesn't get it. My little brothers are twins as well. They're only 4 years old. And if either of them are gay, I'm sure they're not going to understand it, but they've got a great relationship. They're best buddies. They're really close, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that thing of no matter how close you get to a person, you can't understand someone's intimate life. And I think with In Orbit being visually so distorted, and I've put an awful lot of thought and time and effort into the visuals of it. There's a good few VFX in there. There are projections. The sky is different. And what I'm doing with that is not making my producer and my cinematographer's life hell, but trying to pull it off. But it's trying to build a world that feels like you're in somebody else's head, which I don't see enough of in cinema. Like you've got Being John Malkovich, A Scanner Darkly, you know, all this kind of stuff where a film feels like it's real but not quite real, and you know you're very much caught up in someone else's mind. But if I can pull it off even ever so slightly with this, I would be delighted. That's the goal, is to literally communicate this experience to people who don't understand it, and to people who do. Obviously, I want LGBT people to watch the film, but I think there's a huge gap between signing a voting card and saying, yes, we'll pass gay marriage, and actually understanding what the experience is, which is completely different.
It's really interesting you mentioned those two films, because as you were talking about it, I was thinking of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
well,
I love that, and I love the fact that, it will, you know, even with all the pain he's gone through, they've both gone through, of course, actually it's better to have those memories than to try and have them erased. And which is obviously a profound question, you know. And for me, that was it. The question is, would you go through that procedure or live with the painful memories? And you know, my belief is that to live with the painful, it's better to have loved than lost and never loved at all kind of sort of situation. I just think, you know, and it's weird. I always think of love as the most beautiful and painful thing at the same time, because it's fantastic but awful can be, you know. So yeah, I'm totally with you. And I love talking to scriptwriters, actually, because I've spoken to editors and directors and producers and actors and actresses and everyone involved in filmmaking. But what I particularly love about it when I talk to them is how they take that original concept and get it. And in fact, yours is one leap ahead because, of course, this is now going into production. But I always like to hear, forgive me for saying this, but the pain of you going through the writing. What I mean by that is I'm quite sure, though we've only spoken briefly before, I'm certain this version of the script is not the first draft. And I always like to hear how they get from that original sort of concept to the finished, and you may be polishing it now, Katie, I don't know, but how you go from that original idea to one that you might be 95 or 100% happy with. So yeah, can you just tell us how you arrived at where you are with this script that you're now about to shoot?
With the one that I have now, like obviously when I was doing storyboards and stuff, my storyboard artist is actually my co-producer as well, Kat Mangan. She's fantastic. I met her in HMH in the studio where I work. But Kat was able to take my little stickmen that I was trying to come up with and put them into a really clear board. And then my cinematographer, Yara Waldeck as well, who has the patience of a saint and the talent of I don't know what. She's actually great. It blows my mind to have the two of them in the room. But when we were doing that together, it became clear to me, like, even though I've had this in my head for like the best part of 2 years, setting it up as, you know, shot one, shot two, mid shot, wide shot, whatever, it actually wasn't as clear in my head as I thought it was. And I think that's where writers need to admit, hold on a second now, there's a huge leap between writing and directing. Yeah. Because I've never directed before. It's my first time directing. And even though I thought it was very clear in my head, and it is, I mean, I can feel it. I feel like I'm in orbit myself, you know, and I have been for the last 2 years, continuously walking around with the script under my arm and in my head, you know. But I think doing that, obviously, you're going to have a natural thing where you're going to have to break out your scenes a little bit. You're going to have to change things. There was the very emotional scene with Maura and her father, where he's losing his memories and she's afraid of making hers. And it happens about the time that her like Amy, the love interest, asked her to go. That's such an emotional scene. And it carried so much weight, but the way I'd written it just didn't work. I had to completely rewrite that a couple of weeks ago. And I think in total, I've gone through about something like 18 or 19 drafts at this stage. I mean, something insane, because it's also, it's such an emotional story. And I think, like, writers, I don't agree with the idea that writers have to write their own experiences, because I think, Jesus, if you can't imagine an experience beyond your own, what are you doing? You know, that's your job. And obviously, like, I'm 28. I haven't been 40. I haven't been 80. I don't know what it's like. I've done an awful lot of research. So I've had to write, or I've had to research, rather, films, kind of like The 34th is a really good Irish documentary about the referendum. I watched that a couple of weeks ago and I just cried my eyes out. And it's basically people who were involved in the campaign talking about it. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
We've reached out to LGBT Ireland, and Paula Fagan, who's the CEO of that company, was telling us about people who were like, could you imagine there are people in Ireland, and I'm sure the UK and further afield as well, who are 60 or 70 years of age, if not older, and they've never had an intimate relationship. They've never had a partner. They've never been on a date. You know what I mean? Something as simple. These people have never been on a date. That was horrendous. Like, I'm getting a little bit of a shiver now thinking about it. Could you imagine being at that age and having that part of your life and your being and your personality never tapped into? And it was just so horrendously unfair, and like Paula gave me a fantastic quote as well about celebrating LGBT lives and celebrating their resilience, and she's absolutely right. So there have been these kind of moments of, I don't know what you call them, serendipities, the word I've been using, where I've met people and heard about their experiences, and I go, oh my god, okay, there is a slice of something here which is just raw, and I need to go back and put it in here somewhere. And that's happened quite a lot, actually. And even myself, like on a personal level, I know I said writers don't write about their experiences, but you do harness them a bit. Like when I first started writing the script, I was single. Then I had a 2-year relationship, and that fell apart. And there was the part where the relationship was great, and then it was brilliant, and then it was awful, and then it was ready to finish, and I wasn't ready. And there's all these different stages of loving, and of having to let go of it, and of not wanting to and not being ready, but knowing it's the best thing to do, which is actually just purely coincidentally very similar in certain stages to what my character went through. So they're by no means completely the same. Like, they're not, the two stories aren't twins, but it was definitely, going through that emotionally yourself, you can't help but put the storm of it back into the script. So yeah, like that's it. It was a mix of personal experience, research, and then meeting people who had a very interesting take on it, and who also didn't want to talk about it. Usually, people don't talk about older LGBT people, at least not in my experience. I work with people, and I have friends who have older relatives, and I've got a huge family myself on one side, and I just think, I cannot be the only gay person in the village here. Do you know what I mean?
No,
there are definitely people around who just either haven't said it, or maybe they don't know. Maybe, and I think we shouldn't put pressure on people either. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they accepted it years ago subconsciously. Now they don't think about it. Whatever it is, but it's literally just a case of watching people, absorbing it and putting it all back in. And then what I tend to do is I tend to get up early in the morning to write. I've got a little office pod building in the apartment complex I live in, so I'd stay in there for a full day with rations, which essentially means junk food and coffee. Do about
I know what
5 or
that's
6
like.
hours straight.
Like.
Oh god, it's the most. Writing can be very unhealthy if you don't watch yourself, and then going to bed, and then leaving it for a week, and then come back to it again. Let it. A word I've picked up from Graham Cantwell, who I'm working with at the moment as well, is percolate. Let it percolate like coffee, and come back to it after a week, and that's essentially how I've gone from draft 1 to about 18, 19.
Well, a bit of name dropping here, but this might amuse you or make you feel better whenever you're writing a script. So I interviewed Stanley Kubrick's cinematographer a couple of years ago.
Oh wow!
And or one of his cinematographers who worked on I think it was Eyes Wide Shut and Barry Lyndon. But anyway, I remember asking him, I was saying, what was he like to work with? And he said he was an absolute perfectionist, and he was never happy with a finished film. He always wanted to tinker, and that stuck with me because I always, and I've mentioned it to other filmmakers before, and scriptwriters said, look, I always think, if you ever sort of, if you're ever concerned about what you're doing, think of someone that. I mean, let's be honest about it. He was an incredible filmmaker, probably one of the best 10 filmmakers of all time. If even he is unhappy with his finished work, then you're in good company, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, completely, yeah. I'm an awful tinkerer as well. I think it's never finished. Even we shot footage back in, was it October, I think? Because I was going to pitch at a film festival in London, and I thought, look, this is a great opportunity to bully myself into doing some visual tests and stuff. Because, I mean, obviously, with all this rotoscoping and everything that we're going to have to do, you're going to have to test it. So my main actor, actually, Claire Loy, had to come up from Cork to Dublin, where I live, to shoot the trailer. And of course, like a numpty, I used the wrong lens. I was too wide, and the trees in the background are out of focus. And trying to rotoscope around out of focus trees when the camera's handheld is just the most. I can feel myself. I've gotten a grey fringe since I started working on this film. It's very Cruella de Vil, but it's definitely down to stupid rotoscoping. But basically, having to play with that footage for a while, I have to accept. Okay, this is not perfect, it's not great, it's just a test, this is fantastic, we've learned the lesson, we're not going to use that lens again, we're going to use something else. And I literally only finished a version of the trailer that I was happy to show people last week, and we're shooting the film quite soon. So the idea of not being happy with something, God, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. But I think when something is so art house and so it's not even at arm's length away, people are going to have to work a little bit to watch this film and to understand what I'm trying to say. I think you get a little bit defensive and you try and overcompensate and make things perfect. And I think part of me maybe filling in the shoes of the director and trying to just basically calm down about it and enjoy it and relax and chill and have a great experience doing it, I need to let go of the fact that it's not going to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect film.
No, there isn't. Thank you very much for that, Katie. And would you believe, as I said to you before the interview started, before you know it, 15 and 20 minutes have gone. It's incredible, isn't it, how quickly it goes?
Yeah, it's mad, yeah.
It's mad. But thank you so much for that. It was fantastic. And genuinely, it was lovely to talk to you. And as I say to everyone I speak to, you make my life very easy, because filmmakers, script writers, anyone involved in this industry, and it is a bloody hard industry to work in. I mean, a lot of people don't realise what I know. It's tough. But the lovely, joyful thing for me is you make my life very easy, because you're naturally a storyteller. So it makes it a bit of a doddle, to be frank. And you were exactly what I hoped you'd be in terms of interviewing. So thank you very, very much for that.
No problem. Listen, thanks so much for having me, and best of luck at the festival. Sorry again I can't go. I'd love to, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, and take care.
Okay, bye now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.